am Bridget Lake, President of the Oviedo Winter Springs Regional Chamber of Commerce. Thank you all for joining us today for our CARES Act breakdown. The Oviedo Winter Springs Regional Chamber of Commerce is here to serve as a platform for enhancing business and community interests in our region. Most importantly, we're here as a resource for your business to provide education, connections, and advocacy. We've been in constant communication with our local, state, and federal officials and the Florida Chamber of Commerce. Just this past week, we had our local government COVID-19 update, our business resources during COVID-19, and today, the CARES Act breakdown. All are recorded and accessible on OviedoWinterSprings.org website under our COVID-19 tab. We have virtual meetings every day next week, so please make sure to register for them at OviedoWinterSprings.org, going underneath our events tab. If you're interested in sponsorship, please reach out to business@OviedoWinterSprings.org. Now, before we begin, I would like to thank all of our doctors, nurses, our first responders, and our medical professionals who are out there helping others and saving lives. Today's program, the CARES Act breakdown, we have two experts with us, Steve Fulmer of Citizens Bank of Florida and attorney Phil Kaprow of Killgore Pearlman. Now, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box, and the video is going to be recorded along with the chat box. And as I said, it will be accessible later today on our website. Now, Phil Kaprow, why don't you start us off with the ground rules and cover the topics before Steve Fulmer gets into the Payroll Protection Act.
Thank you, Bridget. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. We've been working pretty much around the clock since the law was originally put into place very recently. It's still changing. Guidance is changing. Even probably in the last couple hours, there's been some new information that I've gotten. So the information in this presentation is up to date as of last night at 9:30. Before you do anything based on the information you get in this presentation, go talk to your lender or your attorney, your tax preparer, your financial planner. We are no substitute for your personal advisors. And we don't have all the answers. We're going to try to answer what we can. And if we don't know, we're going to tell you we don't know, and we apologize for that. Things are just changing way too quickly. With that, we can go ahead and get started. The CARES Act covers a whole bunch of topics. It was 800 and some odd pages, and yes, I did actually read all of them. It includes the Payroll Protection Program, which Steve's going to talk about in just a couple minutes. It covers what's called an EIDL grant, which is not the same thing, but is related to the EIDL loans, pandemic unemployment assistance, recovery rebates for individuals, and delays for payments of estimated tax payments and employer payroll taxes. Those are the things that I think really primarily affect the business owners. There's a lot of other topics in the bill that we're not covering, and they're on the screen for you to look at. With that, Steve.
So before we get into this, I just want to Facebook and make sure that I share with everyone to join this meeting now. Share, like, get the information out there to your friends, your colleagues. We had lots of people register, but this is the opportunity to get on and get the information as we understand at this point, and try to do it in a way. We just don't have the bandwidth to be able to answer everyone's individual questions, so we'll try to cover it as broadly as possible. And then additional questions, we're asking that Bridget and the Oviedo Winter Springs Chamber of Commerce be the primary source to send that information. Then she will disseminate it to us, and we can batch it a lot easier than the one-by-one email. So pretty much the Payroll Protection Program was authorized by Congress, and it's being administered by the Treasury and the Small Business Administration, the SBA. This is $349 billion that they're deploying to small businesses in our community nationwide. The max loan size is $10 million. It's a 2-year term at 1% interest. That was as of yesterday. And there's also an automatic 6-month payment of principal and interest deferral from the date of your loan closing. There are no charges to the borrower by the lender or their agents, we are still receiving guidance from the state of Florida, because this will be a promissory note of whether or not we need to collect doc stamps. And at this point, our counsel has advised us that we will be net funding at this point the doc stamps from the proceeds of your PPP loan. In general, small businesses are defined on less than 500 employees. We also have nonprofits are eligible for this, although unfortunately our local Chamber of Commerce is not a 501c3. All chambers of commerce are 501c6s, so they are not eligible. So they gave us last night around 7 p.m. the final ruling, interim final ruling, which means there's still changes yet to come. But essentially, when you boil it down to it, this is how they asked us to calculate as lenders how much each one of the business owners are eligible to receive. So you take step one, your payroll costs for the past 12 months. And the way that Citizens Bank is defining that is we are looking for the January 2019 through December 31st, 2019 annual payroll summary to be able to calculate those numbers. You're going to subtract any highly compensated employees, and that's going to be anyone making $100,000. You are subtracting the excess above. So for example, if a employee is making $150,000, I need to subtract $50,000 from that step one balance to get that into compliance with this rule and regulation. Then we're going to take that number from step two and divide it by 12, because that's 12 months in a year. Step four, we're going to multiply it by 2.5 times. And then there's additional step 5 that talks about the idle loan. If you did receive the idle loan between January 31st and April 3rd, we can add that to your loan amount for the PPP to essentially take care of that. But then we have to subtract out any advances that were done through the idle grants. That's how we've been defined. There's a lot of gray area in this as far as being able to calculate. So again, please do discuss with your lender what their requirements are for them to be able to calculate your eligible loan amount.
And Steve, giving us a little bit of background for you, you've done SBA loans at Citizens Bank of Florida. So this is your field, this is your expertise here.
Yes, I am in charge of all the SBA loans here that originate for the bank. They all come through me and my department, and we have allocated additional resources to be able to help our small business owners get through this and process these applications as quickly as possible.
Steve, this is Siobhan Stolworth. How are you?
Hi, Siobhan.
Good. I have a question. Is Citizen Bank, is that where you do the SBA loans at?
Yes, that's correct. That's my institution that I work for.
Gotcha. Are they considered a preferred lender?
So in this program, every existing SBA approved lender has what's called delegated authority, which is the authority that SBA preferred lenders have. And so it does allow us to go directly to the SBA with our underwriting and our decisioning to request the authorization. To answer your question directly, Citizens Bank of Florida is not a preferred SBA lender. We are a regular 7A lender.
Understood. Thank you for that clarification.
And
but you're able to do this PPP?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Citizens Bank of Florida is participating in this program, and we are eligible to participate.
Okay.
we are asking to put your questions in the chat box on the side, and I will be asking those questions. And we also have one from Jonathan asking, what if business started in June 2019? Will appropriation next done 6 months be done, divided salary by 6 instead of 12?
We assume that that is going to be the way that we will be authorized, but there's nothing currently. It said the average 12-month payroll. That's going to be one of those questions where about 90% of what we what we cover today will take care of about 90% of the small business owners. There's going to be questions like that we are still waiting guidance from the SBA on how to handle that. But my personal opinion right now is yes, they would probably let us say you were in business for 6 months, so we take 6 months, your average 6 months. But again, still no formal guidance from the SBA on that. That is just my assumption and my thoughts at this time. The next slide's got about the compensation, how what's eligible to be compensated. This is another one of those gray areas because within the payroll reports, it doesn't necessarily have all this documentation. So we are still trying to understand as financial institutions what documentation we need to collect from borrowers to be able to cover anything that could be eligible. And right now, my particular feeling is the payroll reports have most of this information that we need, and it will cover about 90 and 95% of everything you would be eligible. I can't make that decision for you, but if I can approve you for everything right now or wait another 3 to 5 days for you to get the guidance and documentation you need for that extra 5 to 10%, you'd have to make a business decision on if you want us to move forward with what we have or if you want to try to get additional documentation together. But again, for 90% of these eligible costs, it will be found mostly in your payroll reports that you'll be submitting to the financial institutions. Independent contractors, they have told us that we have an extra week. It starts the 10th where we're able to take on independent contractors and sole proprietors. And so you are not eligible to apply just yet. That's sort of that gig economy situation. So we're taking the currently non-independent contractors, sole proprietors into the program. We're working with that right now. And then it does have some additional exclusions about employees not residing in the U.S. Again, we talked about the excess of $100,000 and some additional Family Care Act stuff that came through with coronavirus previously.
Thank you. And that looked like it answered Gary's question about the April 10th independent contractors are supposedly open to get similar loans under similar restrictions. How is that going to be different, and what happens if you are both a company owner with employees and also operate as an independent contractor? Correct, Steve?
So the independent contractors, they have a separate time period and they'll have different documentation requirements that we'll get from the SBA. I don't know if this was his question. Like he has his own company and then has a separate company where he's just him. So a company with business employees and one that's just him. If that's the question, then I would say his company that has employees, move forward with the application process when your financial institution is ready. Your company where it's just you need to wait. And you'll be resubmitting the same information, which is a good point. I do have a number of business owners that have multiple corporations. We're going to sort of, at my institution, we're going to try to bulk them in together, but each individual corporation, LLC, business entity will have to fill out a separate application and provide separate documentation. So if you have 5 companies, you're going to do whatever's in your lender's checklist 5 times.
Thank you. And from Karen, in an S Corp, is the amount multiplied by 2.5 based on only that portion on which payroll tax reported, or does it include distributions taken as compensation beyond W-2 income? What credit score range is required for approval?
Great. So let me take the distribution questions. Based on the guidance we have right now, distributions are not included into this calculation. And Phil, if I'm off base on what you've read, please let me know. But we are looking strictly at payroll, and payroll costs are different than your distributions.
Let me weigh in on that real quick. You're 100% correct, because that's what you have to be able to back up and justify. It's one of those times where, as a business owner, you have to make decisions. Do you want to take things as draws and distributions, or do you want to take it as payroll? And there is an impact on it, because this program is designed to take care of payroll, not distribution. So I would agree with you completely. I just want to add 1 or 2 other things though. I've seen other lenders that are treating things slightly differently. in a perfect world, you're going to be able to walk into any institution and get the same loan and the same terms. There may be some minor dynamics because of, for example, the way that Steve referenced, they're calculating income. I've seen some people say that they're doing it on a rolling 12. So it, meaning that they would take it January, February of this year and from March of last year forward. We don't have answers. We have a lot of questions. We don't have a whole lot of answers.
Yeah. The other part of the question, I believe, was about the credit score, Bridget. And based off the guidance we have currently, it does not appear that there is any credit score, any credit report consideration. They have very clearly stated that financial ability to repay is not a consideration for loan eligibility, which goes against everything every lender has ever been taught. But this is dynamic times we're living in, and this is a unique situation. And so we're going through this and we're looking at what's required and making sure that we're abiding by how we understand what's required to be able to process these as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Now, that said, Steve, the early guidance said that they had to do a credit pull. You had to pull a credit report, even though you weren't relying on the credit rating. Did that change in last night's guidance? I didn't get a chance to see.
So there was nothing in last night's guidance that referred to a credit pool. It was all within the application, which we believe the application that was flowing around Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday did change from what was finally done on Thursday night. So please keep that in mind. I have a lot of people that already filled out that form and started sending it in. We believe it's changed. We're asking you to listen to your lender. They're going to give you the right information they need. Don't try to assume that you can find it on the internet of what you need. But based off of what we saw, there was no requirements of pulling a credit report.
Thank you. And from Jonathan, does LLC sole member fall under corporations being taken now or sole proprietors later?
So, and Phil, do you want to talk about business entity structure?
I would say it depends on how you're structuring yourself. If you're an LLC and you're a disregarded entity, then from a tax perspective, you're being treated as a sole proprietor. And so I would. It's up to the lender, but I would say wait. But that, Steve, I don't know what you would say.
It's clear as mud right now. and again, we got last night, 7 p.m., a 31-page document to answer any and all of these questions. And so it's not nearly enough yet. So unfortunately, if you were a client of Citizens Bank and you supplied it to me, the application, what I require, I would say we need to hold off until we get further clearance that A, you qualify under the LLC corporation, or no, you have to wait till the 10th.
And that's interesting that you say that, because I've also been just hearing hurry up and get your paperwork in, but that seems that is not true. That is incorrect then.
I'm going to call it fake news.
Okay.
Everyone is out there worried. $358 billion is a lot of money. And as lenders, we have requirements that we have to do, and we have processes and procedure. And why in that ideal world, you walk in or you submit, because we don't walk in anymore because of the virus and social distancing. You submit, we underwrite, we approve, and you walk out and get the money in your account the same day. But realistically, that is not the way the process is going to be able to work. Again, I can only speak for my institution, but I do not have everything I need yet on the front side and the back side to feel comfortable right now telling my clients that I can take their application. I'm almost there. But I'm waiting for a little bit more information and a little bit more of my back end support to get done with what they're doing, so we can efficiently do it and not have people clogged up in the system.
Thank you. And we do have a lot of questions rolling in. We have from Susan. For the rule about employee compensation of $100,000, does this mean that you would be prorated for the 2.5 MOS salary at this annual pay, or could this loan include up to that $100,000?
It's up to the $100,000. So again, my example was you make $150,000. I'm going to take your gross payroll numbers and subtract $50,000 because that's the difference between what they said we're allowed to have and what you're reporting in your payroll summary.
And back to Jonathan, and I believe he was referring back to his question where it says, does LLC sole member fall under corporations being taken now or sole proprietors later? He says LLC has one employee on payroll, not owner.
Then based off of that, there's a payroll report where you have an employee. I would be accepting that as a current submission eligibility versus a wait.
Right, and I'm supposing that if the question, Jonathan, that you're really asking is, what amounts can you base it off of? It's going to be only on that employee's payroll. It's not going to be on the payroll plus whatever the owner benefit is. So if that was your question, then it's going to be based solely on the payroll.
And from Gary, realtors are independent contractors. So I receive 1099 on my sales income and business income from my company.
So Gary, what I would say to that is that to the extent you have business income, if you're getting a paycheck from that, you're going to have to decide whether you want to go with the earnings you make on the 1099 or the earnings you make on the business income. Later on, actually very soon, I think it might even be the next screen, we're going to talk about some limitations of the program, and that includes that you're only able to go for this one time. In fact, all the applications I've seen require each owner that owns 20% or more to disclose any other businesses that they have an interest in as well. And I don't know why that is, but I know that if you have multiple locations that are independent entities, you can do each one with their own set of payrolls. I don't know exactly how that shakes out. Maybe Steve can comment on it.
Right. Yeah, we're assuming that there's going to be some affiliation standards. So if you have multiple locations with multiple very large payrolls, you may come up against that $10 million bucket. And the question that we don't have clearance from yet is it all your businesses are eligible? As if they all have the same ownership structure, are all the businesses then combined up for that $10 million max? Or are they all looked at separately where each business gets $10 million? Don't have the answers right now.
Thank you. And from Michelle, how is Bank of America already accepting online applications for their business customers?
Sure. So again, we cannot comment. I cannot comment on any other institution. I have heard that they have been able to start accepting. What they're able to do with those applications, the fact that a business owner can submit it right now, and the fact that it can be worked are two separate categories. So I have taken the stance at my bank that we are going to wait until we're ready to accept and work versus people putting in applications and just wondering where they're at and what's going on with their application. So we'd rather get it right the first time than have to go back and say, well, now we interpret it this way and we want this document as well. Again, we just don't have the manpower to handle that many individual requests. We want to make sure we get it right the first time and help as many people as quickly as possible.
Thank you. And from Chiffon, how long from date of application to receiving payment do you suppose this process to take?
So I would have to guess, in a perfect world, that nothing breaks down on the SBA side and that there's no bottlenecks within processes and procedures and everything works perfectly from start to finish. With the current amount of interest that I believe there is for applications, we are hoping for a 3 to 5 day business day turnaround from application to money in your account. I will be working more than 5 days, but I would again rather overpromise. I'd rather give you the worst case and come to you in 2 days than to have you think that I'm going to be doing it in 2 days and then it's not ready for 5 days. So I would say 5 business days right now should be a expectation from business communities that they're lenders to work through the process and work through the pipeline that is about to come through.
Thank you. And Jay Pollock, hi Jen. Hi guys, Jen Pollock here. Sole Proprietors LLC can file now versus 1099 contractors can file starting April 10th. That was her statement. And from Kevin Boyle, Fairwinds is the same. We are prepping business members for what we will need, but further clarity from SBA is still required. Can Steve talk to what financial reports would be needed, i.e. 940, 941?
Sure. So what Kevin is referring to, which is a great member of the board, trustee of the chamber and colleague of mine, is those quarterly tax reporting filings. And nothing in the guidance said that you had to collect them. They said that it could be used. So we don't have clearance. So his institution may ask for each quarterly tax document, the 940, 941s, where my institution may not. And that's how we interpret, because it doesn't flat out say you have to. It will be interpretation of the guidance based off of how we have it at that time and what the financial institution is processes and procedures are. So it could be different from institution to institution.
And from Gary, the 10 million bucket is not a problem for me. Thanks. And Jen says BOA and other banks accepting apps now. It's really processing now because SBA has not released final guidelines. We all were supposed to have, as of this morning, April 3rd, for example, the application that the SBA sent out earlier this week was updated, changed just last night. So all those at BOA and or other banks who accepted applications to prep, those all have to be updated. And I do believe, Steve, that you touched on that. Thank you, Jen, for adding that in our chat box. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Jen. Appreciate the feedback as well. And that's very important, folks, is that to make this as efficient as possible, I don't think any lender wants to get piecemeal stuff. And if we get documentation that is not filled out correctly and is not complete, I can't speak for any other lender, but I can tell you in my institution, we are going to take those applications, put it into a folder that gets notified once per day that, oops, you didn't give us what we needed. Please check over your application and the instructions, and please re-upload the full package again. So they will go back at the bottom of the queue. It's if you don't play by the rules, we don't have enough time or manpower to sort out every single instance. We're simply going to put you on the back burner, address you once per day, and move you to the back of the queue when it comes back. And
so let me comment on that real quick, because back on one of the earlier screens, and you'll get the presentation later on, it talked about, and this is actually a big hiccup, I think, with information that's been disseminated to this point. It talks about how the borrower and agents can't get any fees from or that the lender and the agents can't get any fees from the borrower. Agents are people that can either be on the lender side or on the borrower side. And so what you're finding is that we don't know how to help borrowers necessarily, because in some cases lenders will have their back of the house people, and we don't know how that all splits. And so I would tell you, though, from my perspective, I'm looking to try and help anybody that needs help. I will help you bundle your packages, and I'll deal with the shakeout later on, because people need help, and we will, talk to your CPAs, talk to your attorneys, talk to your resource team. Your lenders are there to help you, but they're buried. They're just buried right now.
To give you a quick example, on the paycheck application that's out, the second page at the middle talks about certifications. And it says the authorized representative of the applicant must certify in good faith to all the following by initialing each one. So we want to make sure that there are initials on each and every one of these things. A prior form said each individual owner. So we were interpreting that if you had 4 owners, we want to see 4 initials on each one of those little lines on the second page. So it's interesting and it's a moving part, but we have to dot every I and cross every T for the SBA to process this. So please, everyone is trying to get this money as quickly as possible. We're trying to get this money out to you as quickly as possible, but take your time, do what your lender is instructing you to do to the letter, so we don't have to come back and put you and not process your loan because it's not complete.
And I know we still have more presentation and questions, so I'm going to continue on to Steve. Is your bank willing to work with new customers on this SBA loan, or only prioritizing existing customers?
So we are absolutely here to work with as many people as we can work with. Obviously, we have a finite amount of manpower and resources. And so, yes, I think every financial institution out there is prioritizing their existing customer base. Here at Citizens, we have been opening up new accounts up until this point, and we are planning on keeping a list of additional people that are interested in applying. But I do have what I feel is a good grasp of our existing demand, and we're going to start with that, and then we will open it back up once that existing demand has been met, whether that's Tuesday of next week, Friday of next week, the week after. We'll have to play it by ear, but we understand that not every financial institution is participating in this program. We understand that there may be some backlogs and things like that, and we are all trying to address this as many people as possible, as quickly as possible.
Thank you. And from Chad, payroll forgiveness. If I take a loan of 2.5 times average payroll for 2019, and I'm currently down an employee, can I add an employee and expect that portion of the loan to be forgiven? Has the calculation been determined?
So the calculation has been determined, and it talks about 8 weeks of eligible expenses. And I don't know that we went through that all, but it's going to be your payroll is the main driver of 75% of this money that you get has to go towards payroll. So yes, they do want you to rehire people if you have laid them off. And then your 8-week period would start during when you rehire them. You have from February 15th to June 30th to figure out that 8-week period of eligible expenses. Other expenses that are eligible is going to be utilities. It's also going to be lease payments if you're renting from a landlord right now, or if the operating company, the small business, has a mortgage, only the interest portion would be allowable for the calculation for forgiveness.
And,
Bill?
and Bridget, I know there's a bunch more questions. I think the next couple of screens actually cover most of this information.
Okay.
So maybe we hold off on questions and roll forward a little bit. I know there's another pause coming up in a couple more screens.
Perfect. So Phil, before we move on, let's talk about your expertise. You're an attorney at Killgore Pearlman. Tell us a little bit about you.
I do primarily commercial real estate transactions. I represent lenders, borrowers, buyers. We are a full service firm, but my world is generally dirt and lending. So if it has to do with real estate or lending or disputes, that's primarily what I do. As of late, I've been the answer of who's an essential business and who qualifies for loans and all of those types of things that are coming out with information that's changing very, very quickly. And so, by way of example, getting back to the presentation piece, I want to kind of jump into that. I had a consult on certain clients already to let them know that there are certain principles related to this loan, right? And I was working on this late last night, so I was getting perhaps a little silly. I broke it down to 3 main principles that are musically related. The first is the M&M principle, right? You only get one shot. if you're familiar with his lyrics, meaning each business can only get one loan. So the guidance that came out late last night said, apply for the maximum you're eligible for out of the gate is the recommendation, because there's no reason to know whether or not there's going to be any second bites at the apple, which is contradictory to what some other people have said, which is take only what you need. You know, I hear that too, and there's a constant balance. We're talking about $349 billion. So there, in a perfect world, there should be enough to go around to all the small businesses. That said, the second principle is the carpenter's principle, right? When it's gone, it's just gone. There are limited funds for this. There's no anticipation that Congress is going to come back with a second payroll protection program. So again, get the funds while you can get it is my, you know, if I was talking to any client, I would say, get as much as you can get. And Steve's not going to like when I say this, I'm sure, because if you have any part that's not forgivable, now you have, you know, an 18-month or 2-year maturity loan that's at 1%. And yeah, I know you're covering your ears. That's from a borrower's perspective, that's a dream. From a lender's perspective, it's probably a nightmare. But that's what the government has set out. There was a question earlier about the independent contractors. I call that the Celine Dion principle. All by myself, right? You're on your own as an independent contractor. You're not paid as an employee. Every contract we write says there's no business relationship between us. Well, the government's taking that seriously now and saying, you're an independent contractor. You're eligible for your own PPP, you know, application. We're not going to count that as part of your employer package. We can go to the next screen. So, Steve, do you want to jump in on what the use of funds are? I know you covered this earlier.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what I just covered just 2 minutes ago. Those are the eligible uses of funds. And again, the majority of this money, let's say that you do have under your business the you're paying rent, you know, and your rent's pretty big. Theoretically, you could use a lot of this money towards rent and utilities. That is not the intent of this program. That is not the intent of our legislators. It is to bring people back to work if they were laid off and keep them working for the next 2 months. And so it has to be 75% of the eligible cost has to go towards payroll. Everything else, mortgage interest payments, rent, utility payments, that's that extra 25%. Because remember, they're giving you 2.5 months worth of salary and they're giving you 2 months to use it. So that's that extra cushion that they gave you and said, here's some additional, what I'm going to call working capital, that you can see the use of funds there.
Right, and so the last two that were on that prior screen, you don't have to go back. When you're starting to compile your information to prove up your eligibility for forgiveness, I anticipate that a lot of borrowers are going to simply take their mortgage payment and say, okay, here's what I've paid. It's important to note it's only the interest, not the principal, right? And I know, Steve, you've said that a couple of times, but I don't think that's one of those things I think we're going to have to hammer home over and over and over again. So if your payment is $1,000 and 300 of it's interest and 700 of it is principal, you are only getting credit for the $300 and not for the $700, because you already have a permanent advantage on that $700. It's strictly the interest.
And let's talk, make sure you understand this use of funds proof is on you, the borrower. You have to provide it to your lending institution that provided you the loan. They will submit it to the SBA for consideration for forgiveness, but it's not up to your borrowers to hound you to get them this stuff. You need to provide that to them in a timely basis. You have 6 months of no interest. I apologize, no interest and no payments, no P&I payments during those 6 months. That's your time period to get your ducks in a row, submit it down to your lender so they can help you get forgiven as quickly as possible.
And I want to clarify one more thing that I also see from borrowers all the time, which is when they call this an SBA guaranteed loan, that means it's guaranteed to the lender. The lender is going to be the one protected, not the borrower. So the borrower has to do what they have to do, or they're going to find themselves paying back this. It's a loan. It's not a grant. It's a loan.
And all these things, you're attesting to a lot of things in these applications. You're providing a lot of things. The federal government in the applications pretty much has said that they will prosecute you to the full extent of the law if you do anything naughty. in your application or submitting for forgiveness, they are taking this very seriously. So.
And the last note on that screen before we flip over talks about the idle loans. If there's an idle loan that you've received, which is the emergency disaster loans that's made between January 31st and April 3rd, the guidance seems to indicate you're going to have to do any portion of it that's designated for the same use as the payroll protection program is going to have to be refinanced into the payroll protection program.
That's how we understand it as well, Phil.
John, I think you just covered this. If you misuse the funds, you're going to be subject to charges for fraud. And if a shareholder or member or partner misappropriates or uses it for some purpose, if they go to the casino thinking it's open and they're able to make a side bet somewhere outside and it goes away, they will be held as recourse people. Otherwise, recourse meaning the government and the lender can come after you, whereas under the general appropriate use or good faith use of the money, they won't be able to. It's a non-recourse loan, as I understand it. So that's, and from what I understand, the eligibility for forgiveness is just upon providing the documentation and authenticating that you've accurately verified that that's for those purposes. Is that right, Steve?
Yes, that's how we understand it at this point in time.
Okay. Well, I think we can take more questions now if you want, Bridget, because that's it for the payroll protection program. The rest of the presentation is some other parts that are relevant to your business, but we know that most people have questions about this program. So we can take a couple more questions. I know, Steve, you are probably like a one-armed paper hanger in a strong wind. So let's get questions for you, and then I can stick around if I need to.
Great, thank you. So we have from Jen, payment timing, idle loans, direct SBA application. They say 3 days. For the PPP loans administered through the banks, once the application is noted as complete with all documentation, an entrant number is assigned by SBA and client is updated on the process flow via automated emails, start to finish. Thank
and
you.
let me qualify something on that. I think there's a little bit of confusion there. It's not the idle loan that gets approved after 3 days. It's the idle grant, which is an advance against the application for the loan, which can be approved after 3 days. But I don't know of any institution that's actually gotten it turned around in 3 days at this point. But that's the grant, not the loan. And I'll be talking about that in just a couple minutes. But thanks, Jen.
And yes, I'm coming up on time here, so if we could address any other questions, because I will need to step off, and I'll let Phil handle the rest of the presentation, and Bridget will take down additional questions, and I will respond to her when I have an opportunity.
Steve, thank you so much for your time. And now we're moving to Laura. And Steve is with Citizens Bank of Florida. Thank you so much. This presentation is being recorded, so if it will be on our website within a few hours after it finishes. If you need a contact for him, we also have the contact for him in this presentation, but any questions can be directed to our chamber, Bridget@OviedoWinterSprings.org, and we will make sure that all those questions get answers. We will put them on our Facebook page and make sure that if there's a specific email back to you, we will get that answer to you. So thank you so much. And we're moving on to Laura. As a corp with a full-time contractor that we 1099, do I apply now or need to wait? I have not taken a paycheck. I pay my bills, rent, utilities, etc. through my sales. How do I show that I need the money to pay my bills?
So the answer I would give to you, and I'm not a lender, but I would tell you that it's the PPP is designed to cover payroll payments only. So if you're using funds from the company for operating expenses, there are other loan programs that are out there. Reach out to the Small Business Development Center. The state of Florida has an emergency bridge loan, which we talked about on Monday's meeting, which is up to, I think, $50,000, 12 months interest free, and then converts to a 12-month note because it's a bridge loan and they want you to refinance it or get it paid off. You can also apply for an EIDL, one of the disaster loans, that is a 7A product, I believe, Steve. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And that has a much different set of qualifications and uses that you can use it for. The PPP is only for payroll. It's in the name, right? Payroll Protection Program. It's not for all of these other purposes, although they've built in this 25%.
Yep, those programs are directly with the state of Florida or the SBA's online portals and documentation. PPP is only through eligible SBA lenders.
Thank you. And from Karen, do you think it will be easier to apply with an institution you already have an existing relationship with?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Alyssa, from a wealth management markets perspective, here is a great resource. We do ask that you do not click on any links in the chat box, as we hear that Zoom has some security issues. So if you wanted to type in a separate window, bernstein.com/COVID-19. Susan, we had an employee resign and have not yet replaced them. Will this cause a problem for us in that we might not be forgiven the loan since it might look like our employee number is down?
There's a clawback. So even if you use all of the money as eligible expenses, there is a clawback calculation based off of your payroll numbers and payroll employees. It's much more in detail than what I'm able to go through here. There will be additional guidance, but essentially where we're seeing is that if you have an employee that got let go, you need to be reaching out to that employee. They do not want them in the unemployment line. The government is giving us authority to give you funds, get them off unemployment and get them into your business on payroll.
And the only comment I would give to that is I've not seen where they're going to tie it up by employee name on the front and back end, because I don't think you're getting that kind of detail. So if you were separating the wheat from the chaff, you need to get an employee back into that spot at that pay rate. I think the intention, like Steve said, is go get, try to reach out to that person if you were letting them go because it was a financial issue. But if it was, for lack of a better word, not an employee you'd want to keep on your books anyways, the idea is to get people off of unemployment, but I think it's based going to be off of bodies, not necessarily specific individuals.
Bridget, I got one more question. So scroll through real quick and take a look at whatever you think the best question is. And then I do need to get going and start working on the process to be able to take these loans and get people money.
Yes, and let me see here.
I can handle Siobhan's question, so that's fine. Why don't you take Stacy McKay's question at 1242, because that's the one that you're going to be more equipped to talk about, Steve.
Stacy asked if the 2019 corporate tax return for an LLC is not complete yet, will that be a problem if previous 4 years returns are available plus 2019 bank statements?
So again, the government was very clear that this particular loan program does not have to be tied to the ability to be repaid, which goes against everything every lender has ever been taught. And what we've taught our borrowers is we need financials. We need financials. This program is special. It's unique. They flat out said, we don't need financials to be able to qualify you for this program. Again, every institution will have their own ways of interpreting things, but based off of what has been provided, there is no credit pool required. There is no financial documentation required. But please check with your lender. So that's all I got, guys. Please email Bridget. She'll bulk email me, and I will try to reply, and she will then post it onto the Chamber's webpage. Thank you all for attending, for liking, for sharing. Thank you, Phil, Bridget, and the team for putting this on, and hopefully this was beneficial for everyone on the call.
Thank you so much, Steve. And we are going to continue with Phil Kaprow, attorney at Killgore Pearlman. Unfortunately, Steve had a limited amount of time. If you could imagine being the Citizens Bank of Florida, lots of stuff going on. We will continue with Siobhan said, Are there any grants available? I was told about a grant for a business up to 10,000.
You know, that's a great question. Melissa, why don't we jump to the next screen? Because I think I might have an answer there if I remember correctly. Oh, look at that, emergency EIDL grants. So as I mentioned earlier, in connection with the EIDL, the EIDL loans, an advance of up to $10,000 can be authorized by the SBA 3 days after they get the application in. It's a grant, and by definition, a grant is non-repayable unless you're committing fraud, right? Even if you don't get approved for the loan. So, and there may be some circumstances where people are ineligible, and we didn't really get into that today, but there is a questionnaire on the application, and there may be some people out there that would otherwise qualify that will be ineligible for either the PPP or the EIDL. And so if you don't get approved for the EIDL loan, that first $10,000 is treated as a grant, but you need to talk to the lender about, to the SBA and the lenders about conditions. As we mentioned before previously, if you get that grant, it will be deducted from the loan forgiveness amount on the PPP loan. So if you get both the grant and the PPP, you're going to be paying back at least the amount of the EIDL grant. That said, the guidance was clear as mud, as Steve said several times, because it also says that you have to refinance that part of your EIDL loan that was used for the same purposes as the payroll protection into your payroll protection. So we think that we know that you're going to have a deduction if you get that grant against the total amount that you're going to be forgiven on the payroll protection program. And so people should just bear that in mind. That's why you need to talk to your advisors and not just apply for everything that's out there. Figure out what you need and what's the best way to help your business.
Yes, and thank you. And from Laura, I applied for the EIDL loan earlier this week. Do I need to reapply? I haven't heard from them.
I would tell you that I'm surprised that you haven't heard from them, but I'm not. There's so many things going on at once. If you could imagine, you know, my heart breaks every morning when I wake up because I know that there are so many businesses that need help. And I know that there's only so many hours in the day. And, you know, I've talked to Bridget about this, and I know that's why she's working, you know, crazy hours. We all are. The SBA is no exception. They're working through these loans, but they are inundated with applications. I would say give them a little bit more time. And if you haven't heard, you know, in another week, maybe check with them then. If you have an emergency, try calling out to them or try reaching out to them. But be patient and let the system work.
Thank you. And Christopher, yes, this is being recorded. It will be available a few hours after it finishes at oviedo-wintersprings.org underneath our COVID-19 tab. And it was a presentation from the Oviedo Winter Springs Regional Chamber along with Steve Fulmer from Citizens Bank of Florida and Phil Kaprow, still with us at this moment, from Killgore Pearlman. And we're continuing on. We still have presentation and questions. Phil, did you want to continue on with the presentation more or continue to take questions?
We've sifted through most of the questions, so let's finish that up real quick. I'm committed to staying as long as you need me. So.
Okay, thank you. So let's finish these questions. Is it worth looking into the State of Florida Bridge Program, or is the money already gone? And is that counted as double dipping, going for state and federal money?
I would say if you need a bridge loan, if you need that $50,000 and you have a clear plan in place to either get it paid back within that 12-month period or to get it refinanced out, yeah, go ahead and apply for it. I have not heard that they're out of money. That is a small business development center type question. Amy Kirkland was speaking on Monday during the presentation, and they are the people that are the formal processors for that state plan that is administered between them and Florida First Capital Finance Corporation out of Tallahassee. So yes, absolutely apply. As far as double dipping, I'm not sure what you mean. They're independent buckets. And so unlike going for the EIDL loan and going for the PPP where there's some crossover implications, the state program is separate. So I don't think that if double dipping means you think you're going to be prohibited from taking from both pools, the answer I think would be no. You're not prohibited.
Thank you. And you're correct, Phil. Amy Kirkland is on, she was on our business resources show earlier this week. She is with Seminole State College, the director of the Center for Business Development, and handles the SBDC part. So if you want to look back on that one, you can go to our website, oviedo-wintersprings.org, underneath the COVID-19, and look for the business resources video. And she did a lot of talking along with Ray Villegas with Career Source. And we also had Deputy County Manager Tricia Johnson from Seminole County, all in that meeting. So thank you. And we have from Susan, she had commented earlier and said, this employee resigned prior to the COVID issue and has already started a new job.
Right, and I answered that question, I think, when I said it needs to be a body, not necessarily the same body.
Perfect. Clarification, resigned, not let go, no unemployment. And I read that the PPP only applies to employees hired prior to January 31st, 2020. If I hired in March, am I out of luck if I need assistance?
It is not based on you. As I understand it, well, let me stop that and take a half a step back. If your question is, since you were an employee that got hired after in March, are you out of luck? You yourself you're not applying for the loan. Your company's applying for the loan based on the number of employees that they had. So I don't really know how to answer your question other than to tell you it's based off of the number of employees that were on the payroll within the timeframes that are set forth in the guidelines. It may or may not include you individually as you, Graziella, Busa, but if there was a person that you replaced, then that payroll number would roll into the calculations, is my understanding.
Thank you. From Siobhan, prior to the PPP, I was in the process of applying for SBA loan for a school. Will there be any conflict or restrictions if I apply and receive PPP payment and resume original SBA?
I don't think, it depends on which SBA loan you're talking about, but I don't believe that the mere having of a existing 7A or a 504, if those are in process, that precludes you from doing this. If you were applying for a disaster loan, like we mentioned before, there should be some implications, but that is a really great question to talk directly with your lender about.
Thank you. And Graziella replied and said, I hired an employee in March as an employer. Okay, thank you, Phil.
Okay, so if you hired the employee in March and you didn't have that employee beforehand, I think you may not be eligible to get PPP dollars for that. But talk to your lender. They may have some other knowledge that I'm not aware of.
And Phil, we're going to continue moving on with the presentation. So if you wanted to take on over.
Perfect. All right. So aside from the grants, the $10,000 grants that we talked about, the CARES Act also covers pandemic unemployment assistance. And what that is, there's really two impacts for unemployment benefits. The state of Florida already has a plan in place, despite what we're hearing about the software and the system and it's crashing and people having difficulties getting to it. It has been in place for a while, and each state has its own rules for unemployment. In Florida, I believe it's 13. I think it's 13 or 26 weeks, maybe 26 weeks. If you have not used all of your state benefits, then you are entitled to continue getting your state benefits. But in addition, the federal government will give you another $600 a week for up to 13 weeks. If you have used all of your eligible weeks, you're no longer getting the state money, but you would still be eligible to get 13 weeks of that $600. And I know we've had questions. I fielded a question from somebody earlier along the way where there was a concern because this extra $600 could be like this windfall for your employees that have now lost their jobs, or they may try to lose their jobs because they'll make more unemployed than employed. What I would tell you is that that's really a minority position. Most people are not going to want to do that. Ignoring everything else, under the payroll protection program, you should, in theory, be getting hired back to your job, because that's what this money is for. But more importantly, if you're trying to get fired so that you can collect unemployment so that you'll make more money, that's only good for 13 weeks. In week 14, you're going to find yourself with a problem. Namely, you're not going to have a job. And so to employers that ask me that question, I would tell them, make sure your employees know that you know, if they want to be short-sighted about a windfall, there may be some long-term repercussions that come with that.
That's a really good response on that too, because I've had some of our businesses ask regarding that question. Thank you for clarifying that.
My pleasure. We want to talk about recovery rebates for individuals. So this is that original program that you've all heard about, saying we're going to get money really quickly. I just wanted to touch on it very briefly because it's separate from all the other stuff we've talked about. $1,200 for individual tax filers, $2,400 if you're filing jointly, and then $500 per eligible dependent. Bridget, I'm sorry, your cat doesn't count. It's people right under 17. It's a one-time payment. It should be rolling out sometime in May. There are some questions about how they're going to get it out to everybody. And this is the one update I made this morning was, as of this morning, I saw an article saying that it looks like Social Security recipients, our eldest, portion of our population, may be able to get funds a little bit faster because they already have that direct deposit information being accessible. But there has not been any final determination of exactly how and when that stuff's going to go out. I know that if you've already filed your taxes for this year, they're going to use that information as the source from which to fund these monies when they come out. And so that's it on the recovery rebates.
Before you go on, it looks like Eric had a question. If I work for a church that does not pay into the state unemployment insurance, I am not eligible for any unemployment. What alternatives do I have to survive?
Well, Eric, thank you for the easy question. I don't know that I have a good answer for you. I would still apply at this point, assuming that you can try to get into the system, because I'm not sure, and you've stumped me, so congratulations. I'm not sure if under the CARES Act, there's a waiver of an exception for whether or not they're contributing into the unemployment system. It's a really great question, and hopefully hopefully the flock will take care of their own. Especially if they're getting some of these rebate monies in, they will hopefully do what they need to do to take care of you as well. There's also plenty of nonprofit organizations out there that are able to assist. You could try Heart of Florida United Way. 211 is a hotline that you can call for emergency assistance and aid. Check with your county sites and information through county and nonprofit organizations for assistance.
And just to keep up with these questions in regards to recovery rebate, if you have not filed as of date and submit filing next month, will you still receive payment? And it looks like there was a response. Siobhan, they will use your 2018 return if you haven't yet submitted for 2019. Is that correct?
Kinsley said it, so it must be correct. I actually agree with her.
Way to go, Kinsley.
All right, so the last piece I think that we're really talking about today is the delay of payment of estimated tax payments and employer payroll taxes. I'm not one who normally reads screens, but this one is kind of important. It looks like you're going to be able to move your estimated tax payments for 1 or 2 quarters, meaning if it came in first quarter, second quarter, I believe it's all going to get moved to October 15th, 2020. But I say this with a huge disclaimer that you need to check with your CPA or tax preparer. Steve and I are a banker and an attorney respectively, and we are pretty good at what we do, but we are not tax advisors. And so seek advice from a tax advisor. As it relates to the payroll taxes, it also appears that there's going to be a deferment. It looks like part of it may actually roll over two-year periods, but there are clear and multiple exceptions. So make sure you talk to a tax advisor about that as well. But I did want to touch on it because on your checklist of things that you have to worry about, and consider as business owners, I wanted to make sure you knew to at least put that on your to-do list to talk to your tax planners. All right, so we made up the presentation, and it was mostly me with Steve's information, but that's why if you don't like it, it's all me. If you love it, it's all me too. But you can get more details on the speakers of the chamber by going to the links. We are going to have this available for download, I assume, for people from the site. Those are actual links that you can link to the full text of the CARES Act. If you can't sleep, go for it. It's like 880 pages long. I've actually read it now cover to cover. The Treasury information page provides hot sheets for borrowers, lenders, and that final rule that that interim final rule that Steve and I have been quoting all day. There's also links for the chamber, the bank, and my firm, if you'd like to get more information about any of us. Also, I would tell you that there's a lot of, when I get information, I try to put it out immediately. I do it first to the Oviedo Winter Springs Regional Chambers members only discussion board on Facebook. So if you're listening to this webinar and you're not a member, I added a link where you could join to the chamber straight from that bottom link. So I think there's a lot of good information there as well. And so I wanted to make sure we shared those links.
Thank you so much, Phil. I love the cat. I love that.
It's Friday. You have to have a cat meme on Friday, right?
I do. Thank you, Phil. So that was Phil Kaprow with Killgore Pearlman. He is an attorney there. He's also a chamber member and on our board of directors. And previously, we also heard from Steve Fulmer, the past chairman of our board of directors, and Citizens Bank of Florida is also a trustee of the Oviedo Winter Springs Regional Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Phil, for giving us that plug. If you are not a chamber member already, currently, we would love to have you. We've always appreciate any support. Right now, 501c6s are not eligible for a lot of these loans and support from state and federal. So we are here to provide you as many resources to our members and our non-members so that we have meetings every day to help you guys get the information that you need to help with your business and making those decisions. If you have any questions that we did not answer, this is recorded so you're able to go back to it. We will get it posted on our website, ovidowintersprings.org, underneath the COVID-19 tab as soon as possible today. So in a couple hours, it should be there. We also have our other meetings that are there. So if you want to check out our business resources for COVID-19, or our local government update that we had earlier this week. Next week, we have meetings every day next week. So if you're interested in participating, please register in our meetings for next week. We have, if you're interested in sponsoring any of those meetings, please reach out to us. We have an update by Dr. Walt Griffin with Seminole County Public Schools. He'll be joining us on Monday. We have the Oviedo Winter Springs Regional Chamber of Commerce Zoom Cafe on Tuesday, the Oviedo Business Women's Network on Wednesday, our legislative update by Gray Robinson, sponsored by Orlando Health South Seminole Hospital on Thursday, and we have our college update with Seminole State College and UCF on Friday. And next Monday, April 13th, we have a special meeting with Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy, sponsored by A Budgetary Service. So make sure you stay with us, stay healthy, stay safe. If you have any questions, please send them to bridget@ovidowintersprings.org. And thank you so much, everyone. We truly appreciate you joining us. We had 99 people in our chat room today. Unbelievable.
Wow.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. If there's any other information you need from us, or if there's topics that you're interested and you really want to hear some speakers, again, send them to bridget@ovidowintersprings.org. Thank you so much and have a very, very wonderful day. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you.